Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So Kernels and Husks is the last of the 4 stories we're going to look at in this particular round of looks at the From a Certain Point of View collection celebrating Return of the Jedi. This one, Kernels and Husks, is featuring Sim Alu, who is one of the Imperial dignitaries. We see them disembarking, one of the two, disembarking for sure, from the Imperial shuttle and then conferring with Emperor Palpatine in Return of the Jedi. And whereas a good chunk of this story takes place during the events of Return of the Jedi, there's also a lengthy flashback that happens that goes back to the days of the Clone Wars. And there are a couple of interesting elements that remind me of other Star Wars storytelling, like the dignitaries are arguing about whether, droids or manual labor should be used for various aspects of things and whether they should be like shipping people off of certain planets in the core worlds and in the colonies and getting them out to the outer rim, expelling them basically. And so there's conversation about how they should only be using droids for agriculture. And it made me think of the Ahsoka novel and the agriculture on Rada, even though they were still, using people involved in that, but brought it to mind. And then there was also some conversation about the lengthy memories of things that happen in certain worlds when people are badly treated during the Clone Wars, and it very much put me in mind of Andor and how things were for him when he was growing up, being in the fight since he was 6 years old, and also how the whole manual versus droid labor thing plays into the Narkina 5 storyline on the Andor series too. So there are half a dozen Imperial dignitaries on this shuttle, and Sim is evaluating them as being very silent and meek around Palpatine, but quarreling and feral when they're away from him, and we get to see a little bit of this in the short story. But then the flashback to something that happens in the Clone Wars, and how Sim is just, basically as awful a person as you could possibly expect an Imperial dignitary to be. And the scene that happens actually kind of reminded me of, if you have watched the 4th season of Barry on HBO or on the Max app or what have you, there's something that happens regarding, or in a grain silo, that struck me as very Barry-like. Except it was sand in the Barry series. But anyway, so this one was another one which it's well written, it's interesting, and also just goes to show you that yeah, the people that Palpatine surrounds himself with are just as awful as you would expect them to be. And that's what I've got for you about Kernels and Husks, which is the last of the 4 short stories we're going to look at in this particular segment of coverage on the From a Certain Point of View short story collection celebrating 40 years of Return of the Jedi. And this is going to do it for this episode of the podcast as well. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it as always. And may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.